brand is meant to mark what something is, a divine signature of destiny written in light at the moment of first breath. In the high reaches of the Vornska territories, the bloodmark law was absolute. The moon did not just grant life, it assigned worth. Every pup born of the pack carried a glowing sigil, a radiant map of their strength, their speed, and their truth. To the wolves, the mark was the soul made visible. But when Eryndra Solvaen entered the world, her destiny arrived wrong. There was no golden glow, no warmth of a rising sun. Instead, a cold, thorned crescent wrapped around her collarbone, dark as a winter midnight and jagged as a crown of briars. The elders recoiled before she even opened her eyes, naming her a voidbrand, a curse sent to swallow the very light of the pack. Yet, as the midwives whisper of abominations, a silent question lingered in the shadows of the birth chamber. What if the brand was the only honest thing in the room, and every person who read it was simply blind to its power? What if the curse was actually a key? Alpha Drevorn did not wait for answers. He chose the safety of the lie over the danger of the truth. Now, behind a vault door secured by 3 heavy iron bolts, beneath a ceiling of unforgiving stone, lives a girl who has never seen the sky. What does a brand become when the lie around it finally breaks? Welcome to Bound to the Alpha. Before we begin this journey, a warning. If you stop halfway, you'll spend your dreams wondering how it all ends. Stay with us until the very last word to see how this destiny unfolds. If you love these stories, please like and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It truly means the world to us. Make sure you turn on your notification bell so you never miss our daily uploads. For 17 years, Eryndra's world was defined by the jagged edges of a stone ceiling and the heavy rhythmic thrum of silence. Her sanctuary and her prison was a vault deep beneath Thornveil, lit only by the flickering life of dying tallow candles. Her only connection to the living was a mute keeper who delivered meals and ancient, leather-bound tomes but never dared to meet her violet gaze. In the dark, the thorn seal on her chest lived a life of its own. It pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light that mirrored her heartbeat. Sometimes the mark burned, a searing, localized heat that forced her to press her palm against her collarbone, trying to soothe a fire she didn't understand. She had memorized its every curve and jagged edge by studying its reflection in her water bowl, tracing the dark crescent until it was more familiar than her own face. She knew the scent of old parchment and damp stone, but she had never felt the rush of the wind or the press of damp earth beneath her feet. The world of voices was a myth found only in her books. That was until the vibration started. It began as a tremor in the floor, growing into the distant, rhythmic thunder of direwolf paws. The iron fawn cord arriving at the gates far above. Eryndra pressed her palm to the cold stone wall, feeling the heavy mechanical thrum of power. Something was coming. Something that had never come before. The gates of Thornveil groaned as they swung open to admit the Ashwalker, and the air inside the fortress instantly turned thin and heavy with the scent of ozone. Kaelmor Vryndal did not ride into the courtyard with the grace of a king, but with the terrifying inevitability of a collapsing mountain. Beneath his dark fur mantle, his inner wolf was a tectonic force, a volcanic pressure that had left him without sleep for 4 grueling days. He radiated such raw, unstable heat that 2 of his most loyal council members had resigned their posts that morning, unable to endure the suffocating intensity of his presence. From the high dais, Alpha Drevorn watched with a mass of shallow flattery that poorly hid his trembling hands. To the court, he presented his second daughter, Lisseth, draped in silk and jewels as a perfect political offering. To Drevorn, the math was simple, a bride to satisfy the king above, while abomination, Eryndra remained entombed beneath 3 bolt below. At the summit table, Kaelmor was a statue of jagged glass. He refused the vintage wine and ignored the sycophants, his piercing gray eyes scouring the torchlit hall for a phantom he couldn't name. He felt a phantom itch in his blood, a searing need for a silence he hadn't known in years. Deep underground, at that exact moment of contact, the dark seal on Eryndra's collarbone flared into a blinding violet light for the first time in 17 years. Unbidden and hungry, The night of the summit feast arrived with a heavy, unnatural silence that seemed to press against the vault doors. Inside, the routine of 17 years shattered in a single moment of human frailty. Eryndra watched as her mute keeper, consumed by a sudden violent fever, collapsed before the final security measure could be met. 2 bolts had been thrown, but the third remained retracted, a silver tongue of freedom mocking the darkness. For a full hour, Eryndra did not move. She sat in the flickering candlelight, her mind a frantic machine of cold calculation. To stay was to live in shadows. To leave was to invite an immediate execution. If she were found wandering the citadel, her father would not hesitate to finish the slaughter he had started at her birth. Every rational thought urged her to bolt the door herself, but the seal on her collarbone had other plans. It was burning with a white-hot intensity that eclipsed her fear, pulsing with a magnetic frequency that seemed to be physically dragging her toward the surface. Yielding to the irrational pull, she took her first trembling steps into the corridor. Her bare feet met the biting cold of the stone floor, a sensation she had only ever read about. Guided by the maps she had memorized from ancient scrolls, she moved through the labyrinth of the citadel's spine. Her heartbeat drummed against the stone as she reached the final threshold. There it was, the one bolt left unthrown, the only thing standing between a ghost and the living world. Eryndra moved through the upper corridors of the citadel, like a breath of mist. She braced herself at every corner, expecting the harsh grip of a sentry or the shout of a guard, but the confrontation never came. Each time she drew near a patrol, a strange, heavy stillness preceded her. The guards did not simply miss her. They experienced a sudden, inexplicable wave of calm, their eyes glazing over as they turned their heads away, momentarily lost in a peace they couldn't name. Eryndra pressed against the cold masonry, her heart hammering against her ribs, attributing her survival to nothing more than a series of miraculous strokes of luck. She did not yet understand that the seal on her collarbone was not just a mark of exile, but a predator of attention, actively devouring her presence from the world's senses. Finally, the suffocating stone gave way to the open night. She stumbled into the eastern courtyard, a place of torch-cast shadows and biting cold. For the first time in 17 years, the air she breathed was not recycled and stale, but sharp with the scent of pine and frost. Eryndra sank to her knees, her fingers trembling as they sank into the frozen, brittle grass. It was real. The earth was cold and rough, the sky a vast, terrifying expanse of velvet black speckled with stars she had only ever touched on parchment. Tears blurred her violet eyes as she looked upward, finally witnessing the infinite. Then the silence shattered. The heavy, rhythmic strike of boots on stone echoed through the courtyard. Someone else was there. Kaelmor had fled the feast as the pressure within his blood reached a breaking point. The heavy air of the great hall, thick with a sense of wine and submission, had become a suffocating cage for the volcanic energy screaming beneath his skin. He needed the open sky. He needed a cold sharp enough to cut through the fire. He stumbled into the eastern courtyard, leaning his forehead against the freezing stone wall and closing his eyes as he fought to contain the beast that threatened to tear his mind apart. Through the haze of his internal heat, a pulse of light flickered, a faint, ethereal violet glowing in the deepest shadows. His instincts, honed by a decade of war, screamed threat. Kaelmor moved with the blurred speed of a predator, his hand finding her throat before his eyes could even register her face. He pinned her against the masonry, the physical collision sharp and sudden. Then the world stopped. The moment his skin touched hers, the roar in his veins vanished. It wasn't the natural silence of the night, but an impossible, absolute stillness, the extinguishing of 17 years of internal fire in a single breathless second. His grip did not tighten to crush, nor did it loosen to release. He found himself staring down at a silver-haired girl with eyes like dying stars, who did not claw at his hand or beg for mercy. She simply looked at him, her violet gaze reflecting a recognition that mirrored his own. His wolf did not growl. For the first time in his life, it exhaled. She was not made to ignite him, but the anchor to hold him still. Kaelmor did not immediately sweep her away into the warmth of the keep. Instead, he slowly lowered his hand to her throat and crouched on the frozen ground, his dark fur mantle spilling over the frost like a shadow. He watched her with an intensity that seemed to peel back the layers of her very existence, his voice a low rasp when he finally spoke. He did not ask her name. He asked a single, deeper question. "What are you?" Eryndra, whose voice had been a stranger even to herself for 17 years, found the strength to answer. She told him the truth that had been her only inheritance. She was a stillborn child of the Vornska, her father's greatest shame, and the bearer of the Void brand. With a defiant tilt of her chin, she pulled back the collar of her muted dress, revealing the jagged, dark crescent seal. Kaelmor did not flinch. He did not show the horror she had expected. Instead, his expression shifted into a profound, haunting recognition. He had seen this symbol before, etched into forbidden archives of the Iron Fawn Court. Text deemed too dangerous to be read by any but the kings of old. In that moment, the truth settled into his marrow. His volcanic burning was not a curse of his bloodline, but a beacon, a fire lit to find the only anchor that could steady his soul. "He buried you," Kaelmor whispered, the 3 words heavy with a sudden, lethal promise. He rose, lifting her with effortless strength, and turned toward the citadel doors. The double doors of the summit hall did not merely open. They exploded inward, the heavy oak groaning under the weight of a king's fury. The music died mid-note as Kaelmor Vryndal strode into the torchlight, his presence a tectonic shift that silenced every heartbeat in the room. In his arms, he carried a ghost, barefoot, vault-pale, and silver-haired, whose violet eyes held a terrifying clarity. The dark, thorned seal on her collarbone was bared for all to see. The court descended into a paralysis of shock. Maelid Vornska clutched her chest, her breath hitching in a strangled sob, while Torvek Haldren lowered his wine glass in a slow, hypnotic motion. To the right, Eryndra Solvaen and the others wore masks of stage horror, their worldview fracturing in real time. Only at the far edge of the shadows did Varith Noctra remain still, his unblinking gaze suggesting that this was not a disaster, but a long-awaited arrival. Alpha Drevorn rose, his face a frantic mask of desperate authority. "A vault intruder," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "A cursed stray, an abomination sent to ruin us." Kaelmor did not offer a verbal rebuttal. Instead, he reached forward and pressed his massive, battle-scarred palm flat against Eryndra's seal. The reaction was instantaneous. A cold, violent violet fire erupted from the contact, flooding the hall with a blinding, ancient light. The elders who had first branded her a curse were the first to drop to their knees. Overwhelmed by the raw power, the guards followed, then the entire court, falling like wheat before a storm. Drevorn was the last to collapse, his face turning an ashen gray as he watched 17 years of lives dissolve in 10 seconds of glorious, terrifying light. As the guards dragged Drevorn toward the iron doors, his composure shattered into a desperate, jagged frenzy. "It is not power," he screamed, his eyes wild with dying malice. "It is a rot. He is infected. The Ashwalker has been hollowed out by her curse." His voice echoed off the stone, planting a poisonous seed of doubt that took root instantly. 3 of the great noble houses, led by the wary Odric and the rigid Eryndra, began to retreat, their hands hovering over their hilts as they looked upon their king with newfound suspicion. Then Eryndra moved. She stepped out from the circle of Kaelmor protection, standing alone on the cold marble. For the first time in 17 years, she used a voice she had only ever practiced in the hollow silence of her vault. It was not a scream. It was a quiet, silver blade of sound, every word sharpened by years of isolation. She did not beg for her life or defend her bloodline. Instead, she spoke of the ancient chronicles she had devoured in the dark, texts the elders had long ago deemed too dangerous to remember. She explained the sovereign seal not as a crown, but as a counterweight. She told them why the king's volcanic burning had finally ceased, and why the void they feared was actually the only sanctuary for power that would otherwise consume the world. She turned her violet gaze directly toward the wavering lords. "You do not have to believe me," she said, her voice steady. "But you felt the silence when the seal opened. Ask your wolves what they felt." One by one, the room fell into an eerie, absolute stillness as every inner animal answered with a bow of submission. Drevorn's final lie died in the dirt. The coronation took place within the ancient temple of Thornveil, the very site where Eryndra had been branded a curse and cast into the dark. Reclaiming the hollowed stone, the pack's oldest blind seer, the same woman who had wept 17 years ago when told the infant had perished, stepped forward with crown. Her trembling hands found Eryndra's silver hair as she spoke words that echoed through the rafters. "We did not lose you. We buried you, and you came back as a queen." Poetic justice was served not through blood, but through the weight of the past. Alpha Drevorn was not executed. Instead, he was stripped of his pack bond, rendered a scentless ghost in his own lands, and sealed within the vault he had built. Behind the same 3 bolts, he would spend his remaining days in the silence he once weaponized, knowing exactly what glory he had thrown away. The ceremony concluded not with a flash of gold, but with the quiet power of the truth. Eryndra's hand remained uncovered, the dark crescent seal glowing softly against her skin. No longer a brand of shame, but a beacon of cold violet light. Varith Noctral was absent, having vanished at dawn, leaving only a single folded note upon the coronation table. After the hall emptied, Eryndra opened it to find one chilling line. "The seal has only opened its first door. I will find you when you are ready for the second." She looked up into the empty, silent hall, her reign beginning not with an answer, but with a question. "Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this journey. If this story moved you, don't forget to click the Join the Pack button to stay connected to the bound to the Alpha family.